Ida for wanting to cheat on my disabled boyfriend? Story 1. Advice needed. Note, I finally got around to browse through Reddit and found this page. Looking at the stories posted here, I thought of sharing my own problem to get some outsider perspective. I tried to share as many details as possible to explain our circumstances, so the text is quite long. Big thanks to those who will manage through it. My 30M boyfriend, 32M, and I have been together in a loving, monogamous relationship for over 6 years now. Of course, throughout that time we've had our ups and downs, but at the end of the day, we were happy together and even started thinking about getting married and legalizing our union. Over 10 months ago, my boyfriend had an accident that left him disabled and in a wheelchair. As you can imagine, this situation has turned our lives upside down. After the accident, I've been by his side every step of the way. I would spend my days at the hospital, praying to God I don't believe in, that he survived this. When he had pulled through and we found out about his condition, all that mattered to me was the fact that he was alive. I knew that his disability will affect us greatly, but the relief of having him back with me was greater, so I remained positive. In the hospital, we had a conversation when he asked me to leave him and to find somebody else, but that was never an option for me, especially at the time when he needed me the most. When we came back home from the hospital, I immediately started making changes around the house to accommodate his needs. I took time off of work, and with the help of his father, we began adjusting the house to make it disabled friendly. As I earn more than my partner, we thankfully managed to save up some money for the rainy day, which has now arrived. I invested all of our savings in buying bathing aids, installing a wheelchair lift for the stairs, hoists and rails. You get the idea. That was the beginning of a long journey. I strained most of my personal relationships and focused solely on my boyfriend. He is and has always been my priority. And not gonna lie, I was pissed off at people who stopped keeping in touch after they realized I didn't have as much time for them as I used to. It escalated to the point where I told some of them what I thought about them. As you can imagine, we are no longer on speaking terms. In the meantime, my boyfriend started therapy to deal with his new reality, but ultimately gave up after only a month, stating that he didn't find it helpful. Ever since returning back home from the hospital, my boyfriend had been apathetic and aggrieved, which was to be expected. I tried to lift his spirits, to show him that there is still a lot to live for, but all my attempts ended up in him being annoyed or mad at me. I started to worry about the things going on inside his head, but he had refused to return to therapy. I suggested couples counseling, which also turned out a bad idea. He got mad at me, saying that I'm looking for an excuse to antagonize him and to leave him. He told me that if I want to leave, I can do it at any point and I don't need to take him to therapy to do so. Of course, that was never my intention. Still, he had trouble believing me. I extended my leave from work, then worked remotely for a while, but it was time for me to return to the office. I asked his father to stay with us and he helped out as much as he could, especially during the time when I was out of the house. I was scared to leave him alone. I felt safer knowing he wasn't by himself. That was apparently another bad call on my part. He became irritated with me, accusing me of treating him like a child. I tried to explain that it's got nothing to do with that, rather with the fact that he's not talking to me, that he put up walls around him which I cannot p.n.dr.day, and that I am just scared. In the end, he accused me of being in the wrong and he hadn't spoken to me at all for a few days. I looked for other ways to show him that I care and that I love him. After a while, I started initiating intimacy. I was HNY, yes. But the main reason was to show him that I still find him attractive, because I do. I want him. I want his touch on my body, I want his breath on my neck, and his shaft in my mouth. However, even though his injuries allow him to somewhat perform in the bedroom to a certain degree, he did not want to engage in intimacy. I only caught him playing with himself alone a few times, but he wasn't interested in doing that together as well. Don't get me wrong, I'm far from a saint in this situation. There were occasions when I would lose my control and get mad at him as well, but even our apologies were uneventful, as I felt he didn't really care. And I understand where he's coming from. He has got every right to be pissed off, to be angry. He no longer feels independent and it's affecting not only his ability to walk but his manliness overall. I'm just getting hit by ricochet. But I'm not in the position to complain. I am not the one who can't walk. His incident did not affect me physically. We are simply both mad at this situation. It's just difficult that every day for the past year we've been drifting further apart. I see clear signs of depression, but I'm running out of ideas on how to help him. Meanwhile, about a month ago, I met a guy. He was employed at the company I work for. He is hairy, buff and masculine, exactly my type, and when push came to shove, turned out to be GY too. We started getting along really well. He appeared to be very responsible and mature, and he didn't hide the fact that he had been interested in me. I'm not gonna lie, it felt good to feel desired again. I found myself fantasizing about him more often, but I didn't think too much of it at that time. However, with the situation at home growing worse, I subconsciously find it more and more difficult to resist the attraction I am feeling to this guy. It escalated to the point where just a few days ago, we went to a pub after work. After a beer or two, we headed to the toilet together. I stood next to him at the r.n.l, where we've shown each other our shafts. It was a thrill I haven't felt for a while. We haven't done anything about it as we were in a public place, but I'm afraid it's just a matter of, a very short amount of, time when I'll do something I might regret. This other guy knows about our situation as I shared with him some of my troubles. Not once did he try to convince me to cheat. Though he had been saying that he admires my commitment and at the same time he grew feelings towards me and he's not gonna just give up on them. It's not that I want to cheat on my boyfriend, but this guy is having the upper hand over me with the way he looks and talks. I don't want to leave my boyfriend. I really do love him. But at the same time, I am emotionally drained. I dread coming back home only to be ignored or argued with over and over again. At the same time, I feel like if I let myself fall down this magical rabbit hole with the other guy, it might be the start of something extraordinary, or something that will ruin not only what I've spent so much time building, but will also have lasting consequences for all those involved. Or both. I feel like I'm in a situation where whatever I do, I come off as the emotionless land. It's slowly starting to take a toll on me. And I know I can't be mad at my boyfriend for feeling the way he does, because he has every right to feel this way. I realize that I am trying to justify my behavior and I think hearing that from somebody else than myself might help that sink in. I hope that if I read about it from people who are strangers to us and our situation, I may sober up and won't do anything SD.P.D. to jeopardize what we've built together. Some people have this way of attracting drama and I think I am one of them. My whole life has been eventful but I feel like our current situation takes the crown. I am glad I found this site to help me gain some perspective and if you manage to read through all of this, you deserve a raise. Thanks for sticking with me and I appreciate all comments and opinions. Story 2 My, 41F, parents didn't approve of my partner, 44M, he left to salvage my parental relationships. This is long and I apologize. I did trim some FD. We were together almost 2.5 years. It's been almost 10 months and I'm still not over it. I'm 41F so I know I'm at a big age to live as I please. I met my ex-partner 44M on a dating app in fall of 2020 and we finally met in person on night 2020. We were pretty much inseparable after that. When we did finally meet we just clicked, unlike any other relationship I had been in. He was all of the things, and he even matched me on an intellectual level. I didn't have to dumb it down for him like I've had to in the past. I could be myself. But he was also a felon, a juvenile offender of a violent crime. I connected with him after he was resentenced and released and on parole. Shortly after we met in person I learned all the details of what he'd done. I later went to Google and confronted him to tell me everything and he did. From what he told me and from what I read in court documents I could understand and rationalize, not necessarily excuse, how his circumstances at the time landed him in the situation he was in. I was willing to judge him for the man in front of me and not the dumb teenager he was. When I met him he had already established himself. My guard was always up looking for any red flag or reason to leave him. He'd been away for 22 years. He was extremely supportive of me when I experienced some health issues, even trying to be more strict than the doctors. He said you have to stay healthy, because you can't DE before I do. He was everything a partner should be, and believe it or not, it was the healthiest adult romantic relationship I've ever been in. I was happy in our love bubble. I didn't want to tell my parents about him, specifically my mother, because I knew she wouldn't accept him or understand and I selfishly didn't want to ruin my bliss. And he was well aware he was a hard pill to swallow. I had mentioned him to my mother but I only talked about him in general and without too much detail. In late 2021 I had started looking for a new job within the state and nationally. We discussed this real possibility of me moving and he told me he'd follow me anywhere and I believed him. He'd be off parole in fall 2022. Cut to spring 2022 when I'm offered a position in my home state where my family was. He was okay with us being long distance for a few months until he was free to join me, and in the interim I was only a couple hours away to visit him every month. I had told my dad about him before I left for my new job. I told him he was a felon and the generalities of his crime. He came up to meet him and they chatted privately. My dad wasn't completely on board, but he trusted my judgment. I thought we were halfway there. Neither of them told me exactly what they discussed, but I do know my father never asked him in detail what he did, which seemed strange to me. Very shortly after he was off parole he came to be with me in fall 2022. My father knew, my parents are divorced, but I hadn't told my mother he was now living with me and I didn't tell her until she asked in December. I told her that he was a felon and what his general crime was. She was disappointed I hadn't told her, but at that point she seemed open to meeting him and we would go over her house for Christmas. Christmas came and she got sick. She had Googled him. 2 days later my parents basically staged an intervention with me urging me to dump him. Regardless of what I said they weren't really budging. At the intervention the approach they took was more out of concern and trying to understand, and we know you may need some time to make the right decision. I did not intend to leave him. I loved him and I felt with time they'd see who he was and they could eventually come around to at least tolerate him, or respect my decision. But over the next few months my mother made things extremely difficult. When I interacted with her it was always tense and she'd always ask why. Why him? She doubled down and started manipulating me and making me feel like I was wrong, like I was doing this to hurt her, as if she had done something wrong in raising me. Claiming she sacrificed so much by never remarrying to protect my sister and I'm sorry, I didn't choose to be born, that she had gone 35 plus years with no trouble from me and now this. They made me feel like a naive child who couldn't think for themselves, not the middle-aged woman that I am. This was my life, why couldn't they let me make my own decisions and respect it, and trust that they had raised me with a good head on my shoulders, and that I was a compassionate, open-minded, non-judgmental individual. While I stood by my man, I didn't strongly voice all of it at the time, so perhaps they felt I was just being a defiant child. And my father being this Christian and using scripture against me when I'm sure I could have also found some Bible verses to counter the hypocrisy of it all. My partner didn't care that my parents didn't like him. However, he saw the emotional strain this rift was having on me and he had told me he never wanted to come between me and my parents as my time left with them is limited and he knows what it's like to not have those relationships. I felt time would change things. The weekend he decided to leave started off great. Then Sunday I had a phone conversation with my mother and he had overheard some of it in the next room. It was then that he decided to sacrifice our relationship to save mine and my mother's. It was the only way he could think to fix it. My initial feeling was relief, or maybe I was just numb. But then I was still heartbroken. It got so bad that I started therapy to cope as my emotions were affecting my work. I never ended a relationship when you both were still in love and in a good place is foreign to me. And I can't help but have anger and resentment toward my mother. I completely understand any hesitation or concerns she may have had as my parent. And admittedly there are things I could have done differently in how I introduced him to my family. But the total lack of empathy, the manipulation, and unwillingness to trust me and be open kills me. Even now she says I made a bad decision, and at least you know what to look for in the next one. She just scoffed that I've been miserable and that she was the factor. How am I supposed to come back from that? I wouldn't say the door is completely closed with him. He still communicates with me, but he is seeing someone. While I hope the universe leads us back to one another, I'm trying really hard to not hold on to that hope. I've been working on handling the grief, not shutting down during difficult conversations/situations, asserting I'm an adult in control of my life and not seeking approval, and establishing boundaries with my mother. TLDR, my parents didn't accept my partner due to his criminal past. I let them know I wasn't going to leave him, perhaps not as strongly as I should have. But seeing the tension, he left to salvage my relationships with them. I didn't make him stay. I'm heartbroken and have anger and resentment toward my parents. I've been working on handling the grief, not shutting down during difficult conversations/situations, asserting I'm an adult in control of my life and not seeking approval, and establishing boundaries with my mother. How do I get past that? Could there be a reconciliation with my ex? Story 3. Am I wrong for breaking up with my girlfriend before her surgery due to her considering her abusive ex a family member? I know it sounds bad, but I do have a flair for the dramatic. Also, sorry in advance for the length here, it is complicated. I am 24M, she is 23F. There are some complex cultural and family issues in here that I will do my best to report neutrally. She has corroborated this version of the story, so here goes. In September of 2022 she ended a 1.5-year relationship with a rampant narcissist who treated her like garbage. Regularly screaming his head off at her, pressuring her into making love with him when she wasn't feeling well, she has a chronic illness, constant manipulation, etc. This has left her with emotional scars that are still very much present and break my heart for her whenever I see them. The guy was a family friend of hers, and the two of them come from a culture in which the family-friend social structure is very important. The parents had known each other for a long time, and she has told me that her parents consider him a quasi-son. As such, her parents pressured her to break no contact and keep him around as a friend after she broke up with him. After multiple negative incidents upon returning, going in for an unwanted kiss, resuming abuse and screaming at her when he found out she was seeing other people, the guy assumed a friendly status in her life, and while we were dating, she saw/communicated with him regularly. Her parents love him and they share the same family-friend social structure. She and her parents have had a rocky relationship in the past, so to avoid further contention with them and the rest of the extended family unit, she has effectively gaslit herself into being okay with having him around constantly. To be clear, her parents know of the abuse, at least partially. I met her in December of 2022, and we started dating in November 2023. I knew none of this, and I had to basically piece together the situation because she presented it as if it were no big deal. He'd be at her house, she lives at home with her parents, all the time, and the two would be commonly texting while she and I were together. Once I had put the details together, I tried to hold it together but eventually had to express to her that it bothered me. Not only did it bother me that she would be hanging out, Christmas shopping, and regularly texting with her ex while I was her boyfriend, but I have also been emotionally abused by a narcissistic soul before, and I could tell immediately that he was just circling and waiting for an opportunity to start it all back up again. That thought made me extremely angry and upset on her behalf, and I could not handle the situation at all. When I would bring it up with her, she would either A, justify the guy's presence with something like he's changed or I told him he can't yell at me anymore, or would B, shut down entirely. The thought of cutting him off made her panic to the point where I explicitly asked her not to, and we mutually agreed the best move would be to fade out the texting and calling. The fade didn't really do anything, and the last time she came over, she was still texting him. I briefly expressed annoyance, but dropped it almost immediately so she wouldn't panic. As I mentioned earlier, she has a chronic illness, and a few days after this incident, she was going in for a surgery with a 6-week recovery period. So I moved the conversation elsewhere. The second she got home, she decided to cut him off, not texting privately anymore, and then cried for hours because she lost someone she considers a family member. I had been very clear that I did not want that, because it actually made me more uncomfortable that she did. I felt she would grow to resent me, and now I'm the villain in her family's eyes. Plus, I know narcissists, and the guy will never go away. He has already been using the family situation as his way back in, and I know he will continue to do so. The day after she cut him off, he went car shopping with her dad. The next day, the day before her surgery, it came up in conversation again. I expressed discomfort, but she immediately switched from the doom of the previous night to completely downplaying all of her own concerns. I guess she could tell I was still apprehensive, because she told me that if I had doubts about staying in the situation, I should leave now because she didn't want me around for her recovery if I wasn't 100% all in. She would need me there, at her parents' house, 3 to 4 days a week and staying the night more often than not. I kept telling her I would be there to support her, but she kept pushing over a span of multiple hours. In truth, I was not all in, and the idea of spending months at her parents' place made me extremely uncomfortable in light of the ex-boyfriend situation. However, I still loved her, and I was completely willing to put my own concerns aside to support her for her recovery. But she kept telling me over and over that it would be unfair to her if I was there without being 100% sure about her, which eventually got me to CR.ck and agree that I wasn't. I immediately tried to pick up the pieces and backtrack, but the damage was done. We were broken up. It's been a week now, and I still feel awful. She is a truly lovely person, and I don't blame her for any of this. I went up to her parents' house. I live carless in the city and she lives 30 miles into the suburbs. It is an hour-and-a-half round trip, to bring her a card and sit with her for a while the day after her surgery. I have spent hours each day on FaceTime with her to keep her occupied, neglecting my work and graduate studies. I have not slept for more than 3 straight hours in a week. I am going to send her flowers on Valentine's Day. I feel like she was caught in a bad situation, and I punished her for things outside her control by breaking up with her. I don't hold anything against her, but the circumstances were so overwhelmingly challenging that I felt like I had to take myself out of the situation. My friends tell me I didn't do anything wrong, but I can't shake the feeling that I did something terrible. Am I wrong? The story about Jess. Chapter 1, Broder A. Ac. Nonfiction. This is story about a girl named Jess. Jess is a young teenager, 17. She is 5.5 feet tall and 88.2 pounds in weight. She had red hair braided then tied it into a little cone on top of her head. She had a very white pale skin. Many people said that she looked like one of Disney's princes, Anna, but we will talk about her past. About how did she end up here. So, about 9 years ago she lived in New Rochelle in New York City, and this story will start from here on her house. So she was sitting on her couch like usual watching TV, and it's still very early, around 8 a.m. in the morning. She was home alone with her big SD.P.D. brother. Her parents always leave very early, well too early actually, so she was only with her SD.P.D. brother, and everything is going like usual except her brother is not home. By the way, Jess is homeschooling and her teacher always came around 10 a.m. and leave 5 p.m. anyway. Everything is going like usual except brother thingy, and she was doing her usual thing every day except today is going to change her life forever. So she was sitting on her couch around 7 a.m. in the morning with her usual outfit, thick white jeans jacket with white stocking and white socks with black mountain sandals, enjoying her cup of white hot chocolate, and everything is going so well until her big SD.P.D. brother is coming to her. "Hey Jess," he said, and Jess is a little bit surprised. "Huh?" she said with turning her head towards her brother, and actually she is kind of afraid with her brother and always try to avoid him if it's not very necessary to meet him. And her brother looked at her with kind of strange look and said, "I have something special for you." Then he smiled with a creepy face, and Jess is little bit. Well, it's not little bit anymore. She was scared with his look on his face, but she just pretend like it was normal and ask him, "What is that?" Then her brother asked her, "Oh, do you really wanted to know, Jess?" Then laugh little bit, and now she was really scared, but she still tried to pretend everything was fine, but she was wrong. It is actually going a little bit worse than she will know. Then she said to her brother, "Sure, I wanted to know what's is that." Well, a little bit she know it will going to be coming nightmare for her. Then her brother said, "It was something fun for you." then laugh a little bit, then walk toward Jess. When her brother came closer to her, she realized if she is supposed to be run, but it was too late. Her brother was too close by now and he put out a thing, then said it was this. She is actually a little bit curious about the thing, but she know it was a torture tools that her brother was collected for torturing somebody. Then her brother said with a creepy smile, "Do you know what is this, Jess?" Ask him to her, but before she answered, her brother was screaming it was a B.DT plug. He said, then laughed so hard the said, "You will be my victim, Jess." Laugh. Then before she could escape, her brother was already capture her, tied her hands, then start to torturing her. He said, "Don't you worry, Jess, it won't be hurt, but it will be painful." Laugh. Then her brother was starting to pull her legging down, then pull her P.N.T.es down. She was got lay down with her B.DT on her brother's lap and her head on the floor helplessly. Then her brother said, "Here goes the pain, Jess. Beware for a plug." Laugh. Then her brother plugged her B.DT hole with his B.DT plug and Jess can't do anything about it other than holding the pain of those device got into her. "No. Stop. Please." Beg her to her brother over and over again. Then her brother start to laughing, then spank her B.TT so hard that makes her almost cry. Lucky for her, she was a strong girl and almost never cry unless it was necessary. Then somehow she managed to escape from his brother, then getting up from the floor and run with her pants down, then jump out of the window followed by her brother. Then she run down on the street with pulling her pants up, then run faster with the plug still plugged into her B.TT and tied hand. Luckily she managed to untie her hand and start running more fast, but still her brother's is on her tail, separated by 3 foot away. She kept running down the street, getting away from their neighborhood, cross the street heading down to downtown area. She kept running until she reaches Columbus Park. There was nobody there and it was 9 a.m. already unfortunately, and she is still running for 20 miles long without a break, and her brother was managed to jump on and grab her leg, pull her down. She was fell on the dirt road and her brother was pulled her pants down once again, then unscrew the plug on her B.TT with ease, expanded the plug, and she was screaming a little bit. Then she managed to kick her brother, then unplug her B.TT plug, then throw it far away, then pull her pants up, but her brother was capture her once again and putting out a new devices. "So, finally you got rid of that plug, didn't you? Well, I still has something for you, and I think I will put this devices on your P hole. Yes, on your front hole." Laugh. He said, and Jess was really afraid right now. She almost cry, especially when her brother start touching her private part. But then 2 men was seeing what happened, then help her. They pulled her brother away from her, then hold him. Hey, calm down, me boy. You can't do that in public. Especially on a young teenage gal," said the black man with holding him, and her brother was struggling. "I can do that. She is my little sister," said him. "There is no way she could be your sister. R.P.St. Say the other guy." Then he reached to Jess. "Are you okay?" Asked him, but Jess can't talk. She was super exhausted and dehydrated. Here said that man, giving Jess a water. Quickly she drank all of that water. "Feeling better?" asked that man to Jess. "Yes," said Jess. She's still exhausted due to 20 miles running non-stop.